It was a perfect autumn afternoon in California when James Carter and Emily Dawson said their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. The air was crisp. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed the garden venue in a romantic glow, and their friends and family cheered as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife. James, a 28-year-old architect, and Emily, a 26-year-old elementary school teacher, had been together for nearly 5 years. Everyone who knew them believed they were soulmates, inseparable, deeply in love, and ready to start a beautiful future together. Their wedding was a day filled with joy, laughter, and heartfelt moments, the kind of celebration that people would remember for years. But no one could have imagined that just hours later, tragedy would strike. As the guests toasted to the newlyweds' happiness, James and Emily laughed, danced, and soaked in every moment of their special day. However, there was something off, something subtly wrong that no one noticed at the time. James occasionally rubbed his temples, wincing slightly as if he had a headache. Emily, too, seemed a bit pale under the soft candlelight, her usually bright eyes looking somewhat tired. But when their loved ones asked if they were okay, they both waved it off, blaming stress from the wedding preparations. "It's just exhaustion," Emily reassured her maid of honor with a smile. "I barely slept last night. I was too excited." James chuckled, holding her hand. "Yeah, and I've been running around all morning. I think I just need some food and a drink." The night continued, and no one thought twice about their condition, until everything went horribly wrong. At around 11:30 p.m., just as the couple was preparing to leave for their hotel suite, James stumbled. At first, everyone thought he had just tripped, but then his body went limp, and he collapsed onto the dance floor. "James?" Emily gasped, kneeling beside him. His breathing was ragged, his skin alarmingly cold. Panic spread through the room as guests rushed forward. The DJ cut the music and someone called 911. Emily's hands shook as she cradled his face. "Baby, stay with me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Then, in a horrifying twist, Emily let out a strangled gasp and clutched her chest. Her knees buckled, and she fell forward, collapsing beside her husband. The crowd erupted into chaos. Screams, cries, and frantic voices filled the air as two lives, just beginning their journey together, were suddenly hanging by a thread. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but despite all efforts, James and Emily were both pronounced dead before they could reach the hospital. Their wedding day had turned into a nightmare. At first, no one could understand what had caused their sudden and simultaneous deaths. Two young, healthy people gone in an instant. Theories spread rapidly. Was it something they ate? A freak accident? A poisoning? But when the autopsy results came back, they revealed something far more terrifying. Something that no one, not even James and Emily, had seen coming. The news of James and Emily's tragic deaths spread like wildfire. By morning, the once joyous wedding venue had become a scene of heartbreak. White roses, once symbols of purity and love, lay scattered on the ground, trampled in the chaos of the previous night. Their families were in unimaginable shock. Just hours earlier, they had been celebrating the beginning of a new chapter, and now they were preparing for 2 funerals instead of a honeymoon. News outlets picked up the story quickly. Newlywed couple dies mysteriously on their wedding night, authorities investigating. Speculations ran rampant. Some believed it was food poisoning, others suspected a tragic allergic reaction. A few wild theories even claimed a murder plot. Someone at the wedding must have poisoned them. But nothing could prepare anyone for what the autopsy revealed. When the medical examiner reviewed the couple's toxicology reports, something wasn't adding up. There was no trace of poison, no sign of an allergic reaction, and no indications of foul play. Their organs, however, told a different story. Both James and Emily had suffered massive internal hemorrhaging. Their lungs were filled with fluid, their hearts had gone into sudden cardiac arrest, and their bodies showed signs of severe organ failure, but with no clear cause. What made it even stranger was that they had both died within minutes of each other, as if their bodies had been synchronized in destruction. Then, the lead coroner noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. There were tiny, nearly imperceptible lesions along their spines, small enough to go unnoticed in a routine exam. When he took a closer look, he made a horrifying discovery. A rare, undiagnosed infection had been slowly attacking their nervous systems for weeks. It turned out that James and Emily had unknowingly contracted a rare parasitic infection during their pre-wedding vacation in Costa Rica. While hiking through a remote rainforest, they had been bitten by an insect carrying a deadly pathogen, a microscopic parasite that slowly spread through their bodies. For weeks, the parasite had remained dormant, showing only mild symptoms: slight fatigue, occasional headaches, and dizziness, nothing that raised any red flags. But on their wedding night, the stress, exhaustion, and excitement triggered a catastrophic reaction. Their immune systems, already weakened, couldn't fight back, and within minutes, their bodies shut down completely. It was a medical anomaly, something that had never been documented before. The parasite, once believed to be harmless, had mutated into a silent killer. Doctors and scientists scrambled to understand what had happened, fearing that this could be the beginning of something bigger. The case of James and Emily Carter became one of the most mysterious medical tragedies in modern history. Their story led to urgent research on rare tropical infections, and soon, other cases of unexplained deaths around the world were being reevaluated. Had this parasite been silently killing people for years without anyone realizing? And more importantly, were there others out there, unknowingly carrying the same deadly time bomb inside them? The medical examiner, Dr. Benjamin Harper, sat in his dimly lit office, staring at the pathology reports of James and Emily Carter. He had seen unusual cases before, but this one was unlike anything he had encountered. Two young, otherwise healthy individuals, dying within minutes of each other from massive organ failure without any clear external cause. The presence of tiny spinal lesions was the only clue. After further investigation, samples from their blood, cerebrospinal fluid, and tissue were sent to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, for advanced analysis. Days later, the results arrived, and what they revealed sent shockwaves through the medical community. James and Emily had succumbed to a rare and aggressive parasitic infection caused by Naegleria fowleri, commonly known as the brain-eating amoeba. Naegleria fowleri is a microscopic amoeba that thrives in warm freshwater lakes, rivers, and hot springs. Infection typically occurs when contaminated water enters the nose, allowing the amoeba to travel to the brain, where it causes primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, PAM, a rapidly progressing and nearly always fatal brain infection. However, what baffled researchers was that James and Emily's infection didn't present like typical PAM cases. Instead of directly attacking the brain, the amoeba appeared to have spread through their bloodstream, leading to a rare systemic infection that caused multi-organ failure. It was unprecedented, a possible mutation of the parasite that made it even more deadly. Ames and Emily's families were devastated, but they also wanted answers. How had the couple contracted such a rare and deadly infection? Investigators retraced their steps leading up to the wedding. Their last trip before returning to California had been a 2-week vacation in Costa Rica, where they had visited natural hot springs and swam in a secluded freshwater lagoon. It was the perfect setting for Naegleria fowleri to thrive. Most cases of PAM occur within days of exposure, but in James and Emily's case, it had taken weeks, a delay never before seen. Researchers suspected that the strain they had encountered had a longer incubation period, allowing it to remain hidden until their bodies were under extreme stress, triggering rapid deterioration. Now, doctors faced a critical question. Was this an isolated case, or was this new strain silently infecting others? Authorities in Costa Rica immediately launched water testing efforts at the lagoon and hot springs the couple had visited. Shockingly, samples revealed traces of the mutated amoeba strain, confirming the couple's suspected point of exposure. Meanwhile, the CDC and the World Health Organization (WHO) began an urgent investigation. If this strain was more resilient than previously known, it could pose a new global health risk, especially as climate change made warm freshwater environments more hospitable to dangerous microorganisms. James and Emily's tragic deaths made international headlines, sparking a conversation about rare infectious diseases, climate change, and the risks of waterborne pathogens. New travel advisories were issued, warning visitors about the dangers of swimming in warm freshwater bodies in certain regions. Costa Rican health officials temporarily closed the hot springs and lagoon for further study. For James and Emily's families, their loss was unbearable, but they hoped that their story would raise awareness and save lives. Scientists were now racing to understand this mutated strain of Naegleria fowleri. Could it lie dormant in more people? Were there other cases that had gone unnoticed? One thing was clear. James and Emily's deaths were just the beginning of a larger medical investigation. 2 weeks after James and Emily's tragic deaths, Dr. Benjamin Harper received an urgent call from the CDC. "We might have another case." Dr. Harper's heart sank. If true, this would confirm their worst fear. This wasn't an isolated incident. The patient was Daniel Ruiz, a 34-year-old adventure travel blogger from Florida. He had recently returned from a trip to Costa Rica, where he had visited the same lagoon as James and Emily. His symptoms started subtly: fatigue, low-grade fever, and mild headaches, nothing alarming. But within 24 hours, his condition had worsened rapidly. By the time he was admitted to a Miami hospital, Daniel was in critical condition: severe seizures, extreme confusion, and signs of multi-organ failure. The medical team suspected meningitis, but after hearing about James and Emily's case, they immediately contacted the CDC for further testing. Lab results confirmed it. Daniel had been infected with the same mutated strain of Naegleria fowleri. With Daniel still barely clinging to life, doctors scrambled to find a treatment. Naegleria fowleri infections were notorious for being almost always fatal, with a survival rate of less than 5%. But because this was a systemic infection rather than the usual brain-centered attack, there was a slim chance that aggressive medical intervention could help. Doctors immediately started a combination of antifungal and antiparasitic medications, including miltefosine, an experimental drug that had shown promise in rare survivor cases. They also lowered his body temperature in an attempt to slow the amoeba's spread. The next 48 hours would determine his fate. Meanwhile, the CDC and Costa Rican health officials worked tirelessly to track down other travelers who had visited the lagoon in recent months. They found 3 more suspected cases, 2 in Europe and 1 in Mexico. All 3 had died suddenly, with symptoms resembling James and Emily's. Their deaths had originally been misclassified as unknown viral infections, but now, with the new findings, they were re-examined for Naegleria fowleri. The evidence was clear. This new strain was spreading further than anyone had realized. Against all odds, Daniel Ruiz survived. After days in intensive care, his condition began to stabilize. While he remained weak and required extensive therapy, his recovery was nothing short of a medical miracle. His survival offered new hope and crucial data. His doctors documented every aspect of his treatment, sharing findings with scientists worldwide to develop better therapies for future cases. This case also confirmed one major theory. If caught early enough, this strain could be treated, but only with rapid intervention. As more cases were identified and linked back to warm freshwater bodies worldwide, a terrifying realization set in. Was climate change creating the perfect conditions for more deadly pathogens like this to evolve? With rising global temperatures, warm water environments were becoming hotspots for rare and dangerous microorganisms. Naegleria fowleri, once confined to a few regions, was now appearing in unexpected places, even in parts of the U.S. where it had never been seen before. Governments began funding urgent research, and new public health guidelines were issued. Travelers were warned to avoid submerging their heads in warm freshwater lakes, hot springs, and untreated pools. Doctors were advised to consider rare parasitic infections in unexplained deaths. Global health organizations expanded surveillance efforts to detect and control outbreaks. Though their lives were tragically cut short, James and Emily Carter's case changed the world. Their story sparked medical advancements, new safety protocols, and heightened awareness of emerging infectious diseases. Thanks to them, new research and treatments would save lives in the years to come. And while their families would never get them back, they found solace in knowing that their love story, though short, made a lasting impact on the world.